Welcome to Roots of Faith. I'm Renee Richard. Today we're continuing our series on the 6 African Americans who were on the path towards sainthood. For today's show, we will be discussing Father Augustus Tolton of Chicago, a priest in the Chicago area, and our own Henriette Dellile from Louisiana. So join us as we explore the holy lives of these two individuals on today's Roots of Faith. I have as my guest today my former partner in crime when you were with the Diocese of Baton Rouge in our earlier TV series. But I have with me Dr. Emilie Leumas. Emilie is the director of the Archives and Records for the Archdiocese of New Orleans now. And, you know, we're going to be talking about one of the 6 candidates up for sainthood, but it might surprise you. The one that we're going to be talking about today actually is not from Louisiana. Roots go back to Kentucky, Missouri, his career in Illinois. So tell us a little bit. I know, but tell our audience a little bit about how this came to be.
So this is Augustus Tolton, and during his canonization process, or during, you know, when you get on that road and people start doing that exploration, the Archdiocese of Chicago and the Diocese of Springfield are the two joining dioceses that decided to put forth this cause. And the archivist, he was the Vice Chancellor of Archives and Records, Mr. Jack Traynor, asked me if I would help with some of the research, since, as you know, you and I do so much research into Catholicism and Black Catholic history, African American history, slaves, free people of color, etc. So he actually told somebody, you need the person that knows more than he did about how to do this kind of research. So I was asked to come on board during the process of doing the research. So during canonization processes, you have to put forth a tremendous amount of research, and you have to put forth this large volume of information. And in that, it's sort of like a prospectus, but it's called something different. But it's the positio. As they're putting that together, they need to do all the research. And so they asked me if I would look at the slave records, if I would do research in the courthouses, and that's how I got involved. And it's been an incredible, fascinating journey.
And for me, I got pulled into it back in 2012. I mean, this is quite a few years ago. Just validating. I was working for the Archdiocese at the time, and so Jack Traynor came down. He's the one that helped us get our diocese going as a records management office as well. So I knew him as well. And so Lee and I would sit over the census records to determine where they were and how they were. But you've gone beyond that in terms of his life. So,
I have.
And you validated last night when I was researching, just to give you a little background on Augustus. He was enslaved by birth not long before the Civil War ended, so in the 1850s?
He's born in 1854.
54, okay.
So he's born in 1854 in a little small rural area of Missouri. And one of the things we were able to do when I was in Missouri was to go to the different churches of the area and try to find his baptism. And we were able to find that. But not only did we have his baptism, so it's, you know, he's born April 1st, 1854, but we were able to put together and find his siblings, find his mother and what is believed to be his stepfather, and not his biological father. But we're still working on that. We know it's possible that that maybe Peter Tolton, his name is Peter Paul Tolton, who was enslaved at the farm next door, he marries Augustus's mother. And so we were able to find this incredible amount of research. But what was really fun was we were able to go into the courthouses and find records about the family. And I don't mean fun in research, because it's rare that you get a nugget of information that lays out these people, what they went through, and how they struggled, and how they gained their freedom. And you just, and not just, oh, sometime in these couple of years. We're down to the day.
Specifics, correct.
Yeah.
And that was one of the things I was going to say. When I was researching him and some of the information that's out on the internet, they had written down that as to whether his mother was freed by his enslaved owner. At the time the Civil War started, he freed all his slaves, versus whether she actually was a runaway.
Yeah, they were runaways.
And you proved that.
We
And I
did.
remember the
We
day
did.
you proved it.
We did. I think I called you very excited that
Excitedly,
we had
because
been
this
able
is
to find that.
definitive. This is defining who he was. This is defining the life that he came from and what his mother went through and the family went through,
Right,
including
right.
him when they got in a rowboat and crossed the Mississippi River and had bounty hunters after them, which is
Yeah,
the paperwork you
yeah,
found,
yeah,
correct?
Yeah, and you know, as we continued on, so if I can go back just a
Yes.
little bit, it's his mom. You know, we have these people that become incredible, strong, faith-filled people, and Augustus was one of them in his profession of becoming a priest, and the trials and tribulations that he went through, having to study in Rome, not being accepted in the United States. But through all of this, it's the strength of his mother. And that's what is always incredible for me in researching, is because I could go back with the research almost actually 3 generations and maybe even further. So originally this family of Catholics were enslaved. They were in Maryland. The masters, the enslavers, moved to Kentucky. When they moved to Kentucky, they eventually buy and bring these enslaved people to Kentucky from Maryland. That would have been Augustus's grandfather.
Right.
And he then marries, and there's documents of them having children, of them, and he's named for this grandfather. His name also it's Guston, or Gus, or, you know, there's a whole bunch of different ways, derivatives. But he then has all these children. And what I think is really important when Augustus and his mother makes that decision to run away is when you look in the Kentucky records, when Martha, his mom's name's Martha, which is a great Catholic name, his mom, Martha, her parents, they're all owned by the same family. When that enslaver, that master dies, he splits them all up.
She's separated
So the
from her.
mother, the children, they're all split up amongst the family because there are 6 or 7 siblings, and they're all sort of parsed out. Martha's mother, within a couple of years, dies. Martha and her brother are willed to a young woman who's her age, the exact same age. And it's when that young woman gets married, and she then, actually with her mother, they end up in Missouri. And that's when Martha and her brother Charles end up in Missouri. So fast forward. The enslaver of Martha, the husband of the woman that owned him, he dies. It's 1863. This is my projection onto the story. Martha knows what her family went through when everybody was split up.
When someone
Martha is married to the man next door, lives on a farm next door, also enslaved. Martha, and they're standing, as we see in courthouse records, being counted, and they're being given how much each one of them's worth. Martha's worth $50. 2 of the kids are worth $75. Augustus is only worth $25, and it says afflicted. So there's something that he's weak. We think maybe he had asthma. There's something that we know that there's an affliction there. And there's 2 babies. The babies are 3 months old and 6 months old. The babies are worth $1. $1. That's all that they value them. So we know this happens. This is 1863. We know they're standing there being counted as slaves. When that happens, it's August. In September, and these are these great documents, in September the widow is asking for reparations from her estate because everyone has run away. And she puts this claim in because she's claiming against her husband's estate for the value of those slaves and to pay the slave hunters. And she puts this in and she says, my slaves have all run away, and it's September 21st. What we know is Augustus's stepfather, Pierre Paul Tolton, had joined the Union Army at the border at Hannibal on September 20th. So they get out. We have the dates. I mean, it matches beautifully of them getting out. The father would have joined the service in order to protect them and to get them out by boat. That would have been, the Union would have protected him and said, we will get them out if you join. They get in that rowboat, they get across the river to Quincy. Peter then is with the Union Army, and he dies in Arkansas of disease, of dysentery. And so Augustus then is in tobacco
factory.
He's in a tobacco factory. He's working. His mom is working at the church. And Augustus learns his faith from all of this. What I find always incredible is these people that had these horrendous, harsh lives of enslavement, and yet when they're freed, their Catholicism goes with them. And it's 3 generations that we know that oftentimes the enslaver is forcing baptism, enforcing learning about that faith onto these people. That's not the case for Augustus and Martha. They hold on very strong to their faith, even after they've shunned everything else, even after they've run away from being enslaved, even after they've run from their enslavers to get to freedom. And that, for me, is part of this story. It's all of them. Augustus goes on. He stays in Quincy. He goes to Rome. He comes back to Quincy. He's not accepted. And that is really hard for him. Eventually, he goes to Chicago.
Right. Now, even as a child, though, too, because she wants him educated.
Yes.
And he's lagging behind because of the situation. Where they are living now was a free state. She tries to enroll him in school, and, here he is. He's with, first grade, 7-year-old, 6 years old, and he's 13 or 14, and he towers above them, and, it was awkward for him. And she appealed to the parish priest, who really said, I will take care of you, because of her faith and her desire for him to be educated and to continue the Catholic, education. And it's her and these priests that they really foster the faith in him, get him established. And then he applied to literally every seminary he could, and no one would take him. They said they were not ready to accept an African-American into their communities.
And even when he comes back from Rome, he's hoping he's going to Africa.
He really thought he was going to Africa because that was the need then. They were looking.
The missionaries.
They took him in Rome, saying, "Great, we've got this,
And they sent him back here to the United States because the work needed to be done here. And he ends up in Chicago at the end of his life. He starts a parish, several parishes there. St. Monica is the parish for African Americans that is started and that he runs. And eventually, on a very hot day, he dies in the street because probably a sunstroke or heat stroke.
They said, from what I could read.
Yeah, it's a heat-related,
issue.
and it could be the fact that
multiple things.
Since we know he was afflicted, it could have been some asthma-related or something along those lines. But he really there's some writings, there's some letters that he receives. There's just a tremendous amount of information about him. I'm hoping that information will continue, that the research will continue, and that one day there's a biography of Augustus Tolton that is written with all of the information that has been gleaned by all of the scholars that have been researching him.
Dr. Emilie and I have been talking about Augustus Tolton, which is not really close to home. So now we're going to come closer to home and talk about a native here in New Orleans, and that's Henriette Dellile, one of the 6 who's up for Sainthood, and probably one of the one that's closest of the 6, wouldn't you say? She's pretty close.
There's
Getting
others
close?
that are.
Getting there?
We hopefully they're going to get
She's gonna be
closer.
close. New Orleans
I
is
would
running a
love
race.
it. I would love that we were getting closer. I know that there have been miracles that have been submitted to Rome, and hopefully those are going to be approved, and we'll move on to her
That's
either
it.
being blessed or sainted and have her canonization.
That's it.
When that happens, it'll be here in the city,
It
which
will
is
be,
great.
which is awesome. So we have done 2 shows in the past, Emily and I, on Henriette Dellile, but we're going to go back for those viewers who may not have seen those shows, but there's plenty of information about her here. The order that she founded here in the city, the Sisters of the Holy Family, teach in Baton Rouge at St. Francis Xavier School, elementary school in Baton Rouge. But let's recap for
Sure.
those who may not know her, just basically a little bit about Henriette.
So Henriette is born here in New Orleans in 1812, 1813. And, that's when Louisiana becomes a state. So she's born right during statehood. The one thing that we haven't been able to locate is her baptism.
Right.
We have her confirmation, which means we know that she was baptized. But at that time, we have some documents in the church and sacramental registers that are in bad condition. And so,
So y'all
back
hoping maybe
then,
it's there.
yeah, it's still there. Back then, sometimes, she could be a Marie. And because they didn't put it as Henriette.
Right,
and,
exactly.
We see that sometimes. And
But y'all
for
know her
those that have
line.
done
You know her-
research, yeah. So
This is a free woman of color, so
she
you've got
is.
her,
We've
her
got-
lineage going back.
We
so.
do. She, her ancestry, her great-grandmother was enslaved, and in the early 1700s. And so you see this family of, strong women that are raising women and raising men and becoming free people of color and becoming landowners and homeowners in the French Quarter on Burgundy Street. And that's where Henriette is born. Her education, we know a little bit about her education, not a lot, but there is some indication in one of our early sacramental records that are with the Ursulines that she was teaching at the St. Augustine School, the precursor to that. So we know that she was in the city. We know that she was receiving instruction. We know that she's confirmed. We know that she's going to start a society for women to come and pray. And that society is that Blessed Virgin Mary, and it's really important for the women of the community to be able to have this. Eventually, that's going to become the order. And that's in the 1840s. And as you said, we've talked a lot about that, given specific dates and all of that information. But here's this woman that people would not have allowed to be a nun in a white order.
That's right.
They would have been rejected. And she and 2 of her friends decide to go down a path that would be very difficult. Their ministry is to educate the uneducated, to feed the poor, and to take care of the sick. And their ministry of taking care of the sick includes the elderly. They're the first ones to actually have homes for the elderly. And that's just an incredible ministry, one in which the sisters continue to do today. They're all over the United States during the 1900s, as in the early time period. They've even, in the 1980s, gone back to Benin in Africa. So this is a group of women that has carried on for more than 175 years the work of Henriette in the Sisters of the Holy Family. And their story is just really, it's phenomenal. It's phenomenal what they've been able to achieve, the people that they've educated, the lives that they've touched, what they've brought to the community that at a time was the voiceless and those that were not being taken care of.
And I mean, she was recognized by the city when she died. I mean, this woman was, a phenomenal force.
She died during the Civil War in 1862. And there's a beautiful cemetery. There's a tomb that she's in, and her work, even after she couldn't take on a habit. Can you imagine? I mean, here you are, a nun.
Right.
You've made your vows, and the community of nuns, the Ursulines included, didn't want her to have a habit. So she wears what they would consider the dress of someone that would be in mourning. So she's in black. She wears her rosary around her neck. And there's a beautiful portrait of her. It was an image, a photograph that was taken of her about 1860. And we were able to document when that was because of who the photographer is. And on the back end of it, it says from the studio of, and, you know, part of that research is to go into the records of the city and into the directories and go, okay, when was he there? And, you know, he's here from 1858 to about 1860, 65, somewhere around there. And Henriette dies in 62. So it's really, the clue is right there that it happens in the 1860s. We can narrow that within a couple of years of when that photograph was taken. And she's stunning. She's standing there in a portrait very similar to the way portraits were taken back then of a woman standing. There's a chair. There's, you know, she's in her full habit. We do believe that the priest went then at the same time, the one that was mentoring her, Father Roussillon, who was also the chaplain for the Sisters of the Holy Family, because he also has a photograph taken by that same photographer during that same time period. So that was a really nice discovery as well, to look at his photograph and turn it over and go, oh, same place. The books, the library that the sisters have and still have today.
They have a beautiful archive.
They have a beautiful archive.
I've been there.
Great historical library of books that came from Roussillon. They have a couple of books that actually talk about the Ursulines and the community and how they taught with the pensioners and the boarders that they were taking in, the young women. And so that whole history is told, and you can see this wonderful relationship that the sisters have with the community and taking care of the community, and also how the community was recognizing them at that time period.
Well, that was a force to be reckoned with, and still
She
is
is.
here.
She is.
Her legacy here within the city of New Orleans and abroad. What about, didn't they have one in Belize?
They did. They
Is
had
that one still there?
No, they're not. They've closed up most of the ones from overseas except for the work that they were doing in Benin. And in some of the places in the United States, they're not as, you know, the order, all the sisters' orders are not as large as they used to be, and they're a little smaller. So they're not in as many schools as in the past, but they're still doing incredible work. They're in Baton Rouge, they're in New Orleans, they're still in the Louisiana area, they're in Africa, and they're still doing the work that they started out to do. They have the Lafon Nursing Home here in the city, and their mission has not stopped. It's still exactly what was started by Henriette Dellile and her two compatriots, and it continues today.